After school, a little bit of work for a few small little production houses in Hollywood, and stumbled into Bob Hudson and Casey Kasem, who owned a studio. And these were top disc jockeys in Los Angeles. And they were doing some production spots. They were using the radio station facilities and tying it up, so they decided to buy their own little studio. Got hired there. Somebody had mentioned that these fellows need an amplifier built for an echo chamber, and they didn't know what all was involved. And I went by there and built up a little amplifier in just a few hours, which was easy at that time. I had chassis punches in my car, and they gave me $40 to go buy the parts from Yale Radio and put it together. And I remember Bob, who this top morning disc jockey in a green shirt, blue pants, yellow socks, and brown shoes, asking me, "Do you know who I am?" And as soon as I said no, and as soon as he said his name, why, of course, his voice I should have known, but I thought I was just talking to some builder, construction man of the studio. Anyhow, I got hired on the spot, and because these were top disc jockeys, they hardly got the studio open. That we had the Beach Boys, and I mean just all kinds of people coming in to record there, probably in hopes that these guys would hear their music. We had a Western Electric 25B console. It was capable of running 6 microphones. It was 7-position board, dual channel, and we had a 3-track machine. At that time, most of everything we did was mono or just split channel, but most of the sessions were all live. I think I learned, as we look at the technology growing, boy, if we get 4-track, this is going to be great, or 8-track, and then the 16 and the 24 came. And you found that in those early days when you were working with just the 3-track or mono, the group would come in, you'd set up the mics, they'd record, maybe they'd do 4 or 5 songs, and leave in 3 hours. Then you'd be on to another date or a break. And it always sounded great, and I realized it was that harmonic and that inner leakage of having to use one mic to share among sections. You might have 6 guys or 60 guys, but you only had 6 microphones, and it seemed like the more musicians, the better the sound. You back up and realize in those days we didn't solo, we didn't analyze each position. You just kind of pushed everything up, heard everything in composition, and the guy would say, "It sounds great, let's roll," and you'd roll tape. As we went into the multi-tracks, you realize you're now spending 8 hours sitting with a guitar player doing punch-ins on a solo. And it seemed like the technology kind of robbed the art. And you were no longer working with a lot of marvelous players. You now were just kind of sitting with a couple guys trying to make something that sounded like a lot of marvelous players. So I sort of lost interest in that and got back into radio. And the processing idea of being able to present the music on the air, kind of like the way we put it together, because these compressors and limiters would remix our music, where you wanted those soft passages, they would be sucked up to full modulation, and then as the rest of the gang came in, it would pump back again, and you'd feel this remixing effect, and that's what really drove me on to start really putting this discriminate idea together. The BA6As, which was one of my favorite limiters, it had such a sweet sound when you drove into it. Its AGC action would take place just before the output amp would clip, and anything the AGC missed, the line amp would take it off, so it was a very tight limiter. And I found by taking the 3 Pultecs and just paralleling their inputs, then take the outputs, feed it to 3 BA6As, and then parallel those outputs, and I finally found curves that you wouldn't feel any compression, but you could really build up a lot of power. So if you had 6 or 8 guys out there in the room, you could just make it just really sound full and big, and you didn't worry as you look at the console. The singer sometimes would lean in on the mic or lean back. You didn't feel a thing, maybe a slight timbre change, but it just held the mix together. And it helped build quite a reputation for me, because I don't think anybody understood they call it the dynamite rack or something like that, what that was all about. But it really just very straightforward parallel system.
Right.
And the Pultecs were great. They allowed me to play around and find settings that would cross over, so the idea that these channels would mask one another. You know, or these limiters just an AC voltage regulator, and it's, you know, stupid. It just sees something and backward modulates. But if you play around with the crossovers, you can finally get where, say, a low frequency portion of a voice or an instrument may cause the low compressor to squeeze down, but it's leaking through the other two and it's not causing control. And they help mask the one that's controlling. So you could see sloppy levels on the board, but you could look over at the Ampex and they're just right up there, and you know, sounding great too. No processing effect. So it was a great discovery, and especially for a kid engineer who's, at that time, that's all I wanted to do all my life was just mix.